and the monsoon season starts for the BOAC 1000. The drivers put on a brave face. The fuel arrives and the pits stock up. The cars and supplies join the circuit. Some of the drivers were quite surprised. It seemed a bit darker when you got outside the tunnel. Chief Observer Bill Webley briefs the observers, while Chief Flag Marshal Monty Tyrrell has a final word with his boys. Chief Marshal Eddie Goodman doesn't seem to get wet. He must have found a dry job. The cars form up on the grid for the noon start, with 2 Ferraris and 1 Porsche in the front row for the 3rd round of the 1970 World Sports Car Championship. Pedro Rodríguez adjusts his visor, and Piers Courage tries to keep dry in the Alpha. And the Atwood Herman Porsche 917 has a top-up. Herbert Muller ponders in the Filippinetti Ferrari 512S. Joe Bonnier hopes for better luck this year in the Lola T70 Mark IIIB. Siffert arrives to drive the other John Wyer Porsche 917, and the Martini Porsche team make it a party. The big question is tyres, and the Ferrari team changed their wet ones for wetter. Jackie X tries to demist his screen, and Nick sends them off to try the circuit in the wet. The cars reform on the grid as noon approaches. And Greville Smith drops the flag, and the BOAC 1000 regatta is on. Vic Elford in the white Porsche 917 takes the lead from the outside of paddock, followed by X, Siffert, Amon, Courage, Rodriguez, and the rest. Nobody's quite sure whether the lights are on to see or just as a reminder. Coming off clearways on the first lap, the drivers were fighting to hold their cars on line on the rain-soaked track, and not all were successful. Barry Smith in the Sid Taylor Lola crashes, and the car disintegrates in front of the press box. The driver is unhurt, and the marshals make a quick rescue. This is the moment when good marshalling really tells. It prevents an accident becoming a tragedy. The race is slowed while the debris is cleared. And Nick, the governor, waves the yellow flag. The flying Rodriguez does not see the flag, and he is duly called in and reprimanded. Lap 2, and X in the Ferrari passes Elford and leads the race. This causes a certain amount of excitement amongst the Italian camp. But their joy was short-lived, for X comes in next lap with wiper motor failure, letting Elford back into the lead. Courage in the Alfa is second, followed by Amon, then Brabham in the Matra. At Clearways, Courage starts a high-speed reversal down the straight, which ends in the Armco barrier near the start line. The conditions are hardly ideal for cars capable of 200 miles an hour and more. Amon, now second, chases Elford, followed by Rodriguez, Brabham, and the rest, streaming up to Druitt. But once again, trouble stalks the red cars, and Amon is delayed with waterlogged electrics and a flat tire. Elford is back in the lead, but now is harried by Rodriguez in the John Wyer Porsche. Elford is passed on lap 15. Rodriguez leads the race. Now, after early tyre trouble, Josepha gets the other JW Porsche into 4th position. Meanwhile, back in the pits, Courage brings in the battered Alfa for inspection. But the Alfa is still a goer, and Courage hands over to Dadamich, who gets the car back into the race. Eamon works through the field to get the Ferrari back among the leaders. The Gulf John Wyer pit brings in the leading Porsche to refuel and change tyres. This Porsche pit shows particularly good pit work. Kinnunen wants to go, but Pedro gets back in. And he's away, still in the lead. And still it rains. "Where's my teammate?" says Jack. There he is, Cobber, having a burn out the South Bank. And indeed he was, but no harm was done to the driver. Surprisingly enough, they managed to put a new flint in and went on to continue the race. The Ferrari pit brings in the X Oliver car to refuel and change tyres. X gets out, the fuel goes in. Wheels are checked. But it's not as quick as the JW Porsches were. Oliver refueled. X gets back in, and he's back in the race. Just trimming a marshal. Things look good for John Wyer, but the second car, now driven by Brian Redman, is overdue. And sure enough, Redman appears on foot, having abandoned, and the marshals, doing a fine job in appalling conditions, are now faced with failing light. The JW Porsche has an unassailable lead, with the Elford Hulme 917 in second place, followed by the Atwood Herman 917. Rodriguez takes the checkered flag and proves his mastery in wet weather driving. A convincing victory for the Gulf John Wyer team, which must have pleased Maestro John Wyer and David York. It was a miserable race for Ferrari, with Eamon best placed at 5th behind the Porsches. The weather conditions slowed the race average and inevitably lengthened the race duration.